Myers Counseling Group podcast. We offer mental health, substance abuse, and wellness information for the community. To find out more information and to access previous podcasts and other resources, visit us at myerscounseling.com. I would like to introduce Vicki Wahler. Vicki is a senior counselor at the University of Wisconsin Parkside, which is located in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Vicki is a master's level counselor and a certified drug and alcohol counselor. Welcome, Vicki.
Hello.
Hey, Vicki, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, what your job is, and what your responsibilities are there?
Sure, no problem. I'm a senior counselor, but that doesn't mean that I only deal with seniors. I deal with all students, traditional, non-traditional, 18-year-olds. I have a student now who's in her 60s. So we deal with a lot of different students, and I'm primarily personal counseling. So I deal with people who might have issues related to interpersonal relationships or mental health issues or adjusting to the college campus.
Okay.
I've been doing this here for about 13 years.
Oh, great. Now, if you could describe, I don't know if there's such thing as a typical day, but just kind of describe some of your days, how your day goes. What are some of your job responsibilities?
Sure, no problem. My primary responsibility is meeting students for individual counseling. They make appointments and we see them. We also deal with crisis situations. For example, someone maybe having mental health crisis, and we might have to meet with them, do an intervention. They may have to be hospitalized. So we deal with students who are here adjusting to the college campus. Individual counseling is my primary responsibility during the day. However, during the day I also do training for student leaders. I go into classrooms and do presentations on issues related to adjustment, stress, interpersonal relationships, all of those kinds of things. Also, we have to do medical records. Everybody who comes to counseling, it's a confidential interview, and so we keep records for that. And so we have to do some of that record keeping as well as research and keeping up on the trends in college counseling and students. So a whole variety of things. So that's kind of primarily my day. Every day is never the same.
So when we're talking about some of the concerns that students may come in, do you find that there's a typical or average struggle or pretty common struggle that some of the students find themselves in?
I think in general, adjustment happens to be a big issue that students need to talk about, want to come in and share their experience. Also some skill building in terms of how you problem solve if you've never lived with someone before and now you're living with them, and how to share a small space. Interpersonal conflicts, those are a lot of kind of concerns that students come in, as well as the mental health issues that include depression and anxiety, sexuality, career choices. How do I balance work and school and my friendships and relationships that I have? Those are all pretty big issues that students come in and want to talk about.
How long do you typically see students for?
What I prefer to do is once they come in, I like to meet with them on what works best for their schedule. But I really like to meet with them in the beginning every week just so I can kind of get to know them and we can build a relationship, because that's really important. After that, we kind of maybe go every couple weeks, what works for their schedule. Sometimes students, I might see them the whole entire time they're here, but I don't necessarily see them every week or every month. They may come in after their initial seeing them the first couple of months. I may not see them again for a couple of years, and then they come back. Something else has happened in their life. They've developed that relationship, and they want to come in and do a few sessions that are problem solving. So I guess on an average, my week is probably just filled with individual appointments, 20 to 30 per week. Some students I see regularly, and others I don't. So it kind of, I want to meet the students where they're at and what works best for their schedule.
What advice would you give for students entering into college? I can imagine there are a lot of temptations and challenges. How could a student best prepare for it?
Well, I think one thing I would really like students to do is learn to advocate for themselves. Be aware of the resources on campus and not be afraid to ask for help. I mean, so many times I have a student and they're concerned about their class or they're concerned about their grade, and I say to them, well, have you thought about talking to the professor? And they say, oh, no, I can't talk to the professor. And I remind them that professors are people too. And so learning to advocate for yourself is probably one of the bigger things that I think would be very helpful for students to find out. And if you don't know how to advocate for yourself, find out how to be assertive. And so sometimes I might work with someone just to be assertive, to learn to ask for help. Acknowledge your own personal strengths and weaknesses. And too often students don't know what they are. And to do a little introspection and find out what those are so they can best address those once they get to campus.
What role could a parent play in supporting their child? For a lot of parents, this would be a big step in getting through seeing your child enter into this new world.
I think we do often an orientation for parents, and I think the one thing that I tell parents is be supportive, ask questions, don't be afraid to enter into their world. And on the same hand, be aware that students change. They may do a few things that you're thinking, oh my gosh, why did they do that? Why did they get that piercing? Why did they dye their hair? Why are they going into that career path? So be willing to encourage open communication by asking questions. If they're living at home, sometimes you have to set limits with them. They're still living in your home. Have the conversations ahead of time about how you're going to handle certain situations. For example, money and how often do they come home if they're living on campus. What happens if the student gets an underage drinking ticket? What are you going to do? Who pays for the bills? I mean, so all of those things are really important. I think too often parents sometimes say, oh, they're 18, they can handle all this. But the truth is, getting to college is difficult, and there's lots of hoops to jump through before you get here and once you get here. So being a listening ear and helping students work through that maze of the college campus would be a really good help to the student.
I can imagine that peer relationships, you touched a little bit on this before, they impact a lot on the transitioning smoothly to school. And for some, this could certainly affect their mental health status and grades. How could this area be addressed so that the impact would not be so as significant? I mean, how could a student improve peer relations going into a college environment?
Well, that's a really good question because peers really do influence people, and we all want friends. So I think the best thing to come into college and realize that this school or whatever school you're coming to can be as big or as small as you want it. It can be as big and you can be anonymous and you can make no friends. And you can just hold on to the friends you had in high school. Or you can say, I want to reach out and make some new friends. And so then you really reach out. However, making the right friends is what's going to be important. So you got to figure out what's important to you and stick to those values because you are going to be exposed to a lot of different people who have a lot of different experiences than you, and some of them may not be that helpful for you. If you get involved with those people, for example, if you with a group of friends who like to party and to drink, and you fall into that category, sometimes those people get caught, and they have other kinds of consequences. So whatever kind of peer group you get involved with, understand that there might be consequences to your behavior. Some of those may be really, really positive. Like you may join a club and realize that, wow, I really like this. And so you're going to incorporate that into your life. Maybe you, for example, a volunteer club. However, you may get involved with people who may not be the most helpful for you. So be aware of what's important to you. Stick to those people who really bring out the best in you and share in your values, and that tends to be more successful.
Obviously, college is a lot different than high school. Students have a lot more autonomy in keeping up with assignments. what suggestions would you have for students not accustomed to this type of autonomy?
One of the biggest struggles that students have is time management. All of a sudden, they have a bunch of free time on their hands, and they don't know what to do. So right from the beginning, set a schedule. And that schedule includes not only when you go to class, but if you have a job, obviously that's going to be in your schedule, but schedule time for study, schedule time for having fun and for exercise and for social time. I think that the challenge that comes with having an autonomy is like, oh, I have free time. Yay, I can do whatever I want. Well, of course that's true, but you want it to continue to be productive.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think is a really big challenge for students. The other part of it is explore lots of options on campus. One of the things that every campus has is activities and speakers coming in and opportunities. You can enrich your life greatly by taking advantage of these. And so I would really encourage students to do that as well.
Great. Now, what advice would you give students in finding a direction for career path? I mean, what may be helpful for a student to know if they feel stuck regarding career and class choices?
Well, I think sometimes students think, oh, I have to have this all figured out. I have to know, what career I'm going for, and once I start. And quite frankly, that's not necessarily the truth. I've had so many students who have changed their direction along the way. I had one student who came in knowing she was going to be a teacher, prepared for that, but after her junior year, came into my office and said, I don't like this. And so at that point, she changed her direction, and she was so happy with that. So I think sometimes if you can be open and you can be willing to look at other options, and obviously coming to a four-year college, there's some required classes that you have to take that allows you to do that. Embrace that. There's also typically a career center. I often recommend students to go down to the career center. There's interest inventories that they can take. They have tons of literature and resources about careers, what kind of education you need, what kind of salary you might reach, all of those. And then many times shadowing people, getting out there, going to the work field. You think you want to be an optometrist? Well, go and shadow an optometrist and say, I don't really like doing this. So I think career paths, be open, be willing to explore and find out what your strengths are. What you think you might really like coming in may not be the truth. And so be honest with yourself about that. I don't know, did that give you an answer for that?
Yes, you did. So what you're saying, you don't necessarily need to know what career you want, what career path you want to go down prior to going to college.
Yes and no. If you're like on a strict path of being a doctor, for example, you might. But I think really too often, I think the average number of times people change is 3. So people coming in having an idea, some people stick to it, but a lot of times people change more than once. I changed my career path 3 times. I actually did that when I went to school. So I think more often that is truer than just typically people saying this is what I want to do and they don't change along the way.
So one more time, then you mentioned the average amount of changes a student would have as far as committing to a major in career path would be 3.
Right. Some people obviously they stick to what they come in, but
right.
Other times people change more than 3 times, and so it just kind of averages out.
Oh.
So yeah.
That's interesting. Now, are there other resources, other suggestions that you'd be able to make for some students or future students in helping them, make these kind of decisions?
I think if you're in high school, there's typically, resources that your guidance counselor can give you about schools. But within those schools, there's also career opportunities and majors. I think that exploring those, if you're really thinking about going to a four-year college, is really important. There's also tons of online resources that you can take those interest inventories that I alluded to earlier about in the career path, and they can really line you up with this is your interest, these are the potential careers, and go to pursue those careers. So I think doing a little bit of research is helpful. When you go on college visits, you can do that and find out what kind of career center do we have here, because typically students don't know what they want to do. And so exploring as much as you can, asking lots of questions. Some people aren't. I had a student who came to campus and she was here. She went one semester and she looked at me and said, I really don't like this. She said, I don't like to sit in class. I don't like to read. I don't like to study. I like to do hands-on things. Completely changed her direction and went to a technical college. And that was really the best choice for her because she figured it out. I don't like to do this. And where are my strengths? Hands-on. So sometimes it's really important that you find that out in the process. So that works really well as well. So hopefully there's resources out there. There's online. There's people. There's professionals to talk to. There's guidance counselors in the high school level to talk to. There's many, many people. Don't be shy and do that.
Now, Vicki, the services that you provide, are they offered at other colleges? And if so, how would somebody find a professional doing what you do?
That's a really good question. I think most college campuses absolutely have a counseling center. And some of them are standalone counseling centers, meaning you could go onto their website and you could type in student counseling, you could type in student services, and it'll pull it right up. Other ones, like the one here at Parkside, we're joined with health centers. So if you came here to our website, it would be Student Health and Counseling Center. And we provide both health. We have nurse practitioners here as well as counseling. So most college campuses have that. Rarely do they not. So if they don't have it on campus, they have resources off campus that they can refer you to. Just going to the website and looking for it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's easier said than done. I realize that, but if you go and look for counseling services, you're going to find it. And on those websites, they have tons of information about preparing for college, what to look for. They have articles. They have links where you can find articles about depression, about study skills, about time management, stress reduction. So it's just a whole wealth of information. Some campuses offer group counseling as well. So they do the individual, the group counseling that are short term, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, and you could join that as well. So lots of resources. The whole goal of counseling centers on a college campus is for a student to be successful academically and personally, because we know students coming to college, they just don't learn about academic information. They're just going to continually to grow. It's their time away from home to figure out what's important to them, and they really get to grow personally. And that's why I really like working with college students.
I definitely get the impression that not only do you handle crises and day-to-day struggles, but there's a lot of proactive information that you guys provide out there. Things that would help prepare students and even parents for this very challenging transition. And
Absolutely.
I think you've outlined some real good options for parents and not only handling and students for handling day-to-day challenges, but also to look at this in a very proactive manner in being able to prepare for this transition.
Absolutely, Mark.
Now, Vicki, we covered a lot of different areas, and I really appreciate your time. Would there be other, just some closing remarks, any suggestions that you may have for students and or parents that you feel may be helpful?
As students, do some research rather, explore your options, and come to school with your eyes open. Be willing to be challenged. Be willing to be challenged academically and personally, and know that you're going to grow. So I think that it can be an exciting time for students. For parents, it's letting go, and it's a process of figuring that out. And there's a lot of tug and pull going on. You want students to grow, and you want to let go, but you also have to give them a little too, and they need a little bit of direction. So I think it's about balancing act, whether it's balancing for the student, figuring out how to manage their time, as well as parents managing their students in this new phase of their life. It's exciting times. Embrace it.
Thank you. Vicki, I appreciate your time. This is very helpful information for us to be passing on to potential students, current students, and parents as well. Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.
Hello. Welcome to Myers Counseling Group Podcast.